Hi, welcome to MyFSY. This is a level 1 strength video during which we're going to look at one of the key poses in the whole yoga pantheon. It's called downward facing dog. As a beginner, downward dog is typically a little bit frustrating because of some tightness in the shoulders or in the backs of the legs. So it feels like a lot of strength is required. But I want to show you some techniques so that it's going to feel hopefully more comfortable, and that the strength you are using for your arms and legs provides an amazing feeling of length through your spine. So to start, you'll probably need some yoga blocks. Not everyone always has yoga blocks around, but we found a stack of coffee table books or telephone books, yellow pages. Those would work. Just have something that's firm and supportive for you to sit on. Right now I'm taking 2 blocks like this, and I'm going to grant that maybe if you've never done yoga before, or if you haven't done it in a while, it'd be better for you to sit higher on your 2 blocks in what we call the hero's pose. Notice that my knees are pretty close together. The feet are just a little bit wider than hips width apart. So you take some time to set that up. Knees a little close together, feet a little wider than hips width apart. Take a look back at your toes and make sure that the toes are aimed straight backward, because a lot of times they'll tend to wing out or even turn too far in, and that puts awkward forces on the knees. So alignment, you align your legs, you feel like you can sit on this comfortable height. Most people, especially if you don't have any history of knee injuries, most people find this to be pretty comfortable. So you could sit 1 notch lower. You could even remove one of the blocks or a couple of your yellow pages and sit 1 notch lower like I'm doing now. And you'll feel a little bit more stretch for your ankles, maybe a little bit in your thighs. But the key point, or the advantage of doing hero's pose, is that it helps you sit with a neutral pelvis. Neutral meaning not tipped backward, which is part of our posture of collapse that we do when we're at the computer. Not overly tipped forward, which some of us do when we have too much curve in the lower back. Neutral would be right between those two. So you might even take a moment. As you sit here in hero's pose to tip your pelvis backward, and then to tip it forward, to tip it backward, to tip it forward. And as you do that, you'll start to feel your buttock bones. Technically, your ischial tuberosities, I prefer to just say your buttock bones. They're the hard bones that you'll feel at the bottom of your pelvis. You'll start to feel them moving along the hard surface of your block or your phone books. When you tip forward, you're sitting more on the front edge of those buttock bones. When you tip your pelvis backward, you're sitting more on the back edge. And they're even shaped like a rocking chair. So ideally, you'd want to not be rocking anymore, and you'd want to be right on top, right in the middle of that rocking chair. Just doing that can alleviate a lot of mild lower back pain, because a lot of times the reason the lower back hurts is because it's fallen out of its neutral state. So if you neutralize your pelvis in old hero's pose, you take your hands together like so, and then open the palms forward and hook your thumbs. You stretch your arms forward, away from your front torso. And when you pull your thumbs against each other, hopefully you see that your elbows begin to straighten and stretch. So you look side to side, look at the skin of your inner elbows, and see that it's open. Keeping that openness, slowly start to take your arms overhead. Slowly. Now most of us, myself included, we tend to tighten our throat whenever we take our arms overhead. And who knows the reason why we do it, but it's not a very useful habit. It's sort of, it gives us a feeling of being a little strangled. So what I do is I turn my head a little bit side to side, like I'm saying no to self-strangulation. And yes to this elongation. So I can reach up through my straight arms without tightening my throat or holding my breath. And so you want to just feel this nice stretch for your side body, really for your chest, and even your back body should all be feeling like they're getting long. Nice and long. Take a couple more moments. Stretch out fully through your elbows. Feel your buttock bones on that block. Notice the length you've created in your waist, and without losing it, let your arms come out wide to the side, just like this. So from here, with your palms facing up, cross your right arm all the way on top of your left arm and bend your elbows. Pretty much everybody can be in this shape. Sometimes if you're a weightlifter or if you have a lot of muscle mass in your chest, this could be quite a bit of a stretch. So I would recommend that you'd stay here and just focus on pushing your elbows against each other. Sometimes it's fun to wrap your forearms around each other like I'm doing now. And that just makes it a little bit more intense of a stretch. So remember your options. We're level 1 members, so we're just going to take it, I would take nothing for granted. If you're here, you're pushing your elbows together and you're trying to stretch the back of your chest open. If you've entwined your forearms, you're doing the same thing. You're squeezing your elbows together and you're stretching the back of your chest open. Take one more inhale into that space. And then exhale, release your arms out wide. Just like that. Go back to prayer hands. Hook your thumbs together again. Straighten your arms forward. Fully extend your inner elbows. And then slowly go up. Arms going up and up. Say no to self-strangulation. Say yes to elongation. Elongation of your waist. And that too, that should feel really good for your lower back. Almost like you don't even have a lower back because it's gotten so light, so empty, so decongested. Exhale your arms out wide. Keep your palms facing up. Cross your left arm all the way over your right arm. Bend your elbows. Remember the options. Almost everybody could do option 1, which is just squeezing the elbows together to stretch the back. For those who can, wrap your forearms around each other. The palms should be facing together. And you're still doing the same action. You're squeezing those elbows together to spread open your upper back. That's such a huge repository for stress, especially if you sit at a desk a lot of time during your day. You're well aware of the fact that the upper back tends to house quite a bit of stress. And yet somehow when you inhale into that space of your upper back, it starts to dissipate. Exhale, release your arms out wide, and then all the way down to your thighs. So that's a little warm up for your arms to prepare us for downward dog. From here, you'll lean forward onto all fours. I'll turn so you can see me from the profile. It's quite common if you haven't done yoga before, if your legs are a little tight, that just doing hero's pose for a few minutes will make your knees stiff. So try straightening one of your legs back. Try flexing the foot and reaching through the heel just to clear that knee. And it usually feels pretty good for the knee. Do it on the other side. You stretch the leg back. You keep the toes curled under. You press back through the heel to straighten the knee. And then release. Now align your shoulders directly over your wrists. From there, slide your knees back a good 3 inches behind your hips. So you can see my shoulders are over my wrists and my knees are a few inches back behind the hips. Notice also I have the toes curled under. So you want to keep the toes curled under and now start to move your hips back away from your hands. This is a very useful useful precursor for downward dog. We call it the puppy dog pose because it's a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller than your regular down dog. And the key thing to feel here is that your hands are grounded and that your hips are moving back away from your hands. It should feel again like a pleasant stretch for your lower back. Come back to where we started with your shoulders over your wrists and your hips your knees a few inches behind your hips. Keep your toes curled under. Now start to lift your knees up off the floor. In the same way you were just doing moments ago, you push the hips back away from your hands. As a beginner, you'll find it much, much easier to keep your knees a little bit bent. So try that. Keep the knees bent. And focus firstly on your arms. This is where the strength comes in. You want to spread your shoulder blades wide across your back like we just did in that upper back stretch. And at the same time, you want to straighten your elbows. They seem like oppositional forces, so it might be confusing in the beginning. Spread your upper back wide, and yet fully straighten your elbows. You'll notice that there's more strength, more zip to your arms, and that the extension of your arms feeds in to the length of your waist. Give it a couple more breaths. Remember to let your neck be easy. And then release. Come on down. Bend your knees to the ground. Point your toes this time. Separate the knees just a little wider than hips width apart. And then slowly move your hips all the way back onto your heels. It's good to give your arms a little break as well. Let the arms stretch back the same way the feet are facing. Let your head rest. And while this one, for many people, I find it very comforting. This is called the child's pose. If for some reason it irritates your knees, then just don't bend them quite as much. Let's try downward dog again. Walk your hands forward. Lift your hips off your heels. Let's line it up so you have your shoulders over your wrists and your knees a few inches behind your hips. Curl your toes under. Lift your knees up off the floor. Keeping the knees a little bit bent, begin to move your hips away from your hands. Now remember the armpits. You're going to spread your upper back nice and wide while you straighten your elbows. From that foundation of your hands, find the imaginary block that's underneath your buttock bones and begin to push it back. Push it way back so that again you start to feel the length of your lower back opening, maybe like a telescope. The lower back lengthens as you push your hips back away from your hands. Keep feeling the strength of your arms, enabling the length of your waist. And while keeping that length, see if you can now make both legs straight. Did you hold your breath? Sometimes I do too. Try it again with your knees a little bit bent and your waist very long. Keep breathing as you straighten your legs. And come down for a rest. Child's pose, we call it. Point your toes. Separate your knees a little wider than hips width. And as you sink down, just rest your head. Very useful to take ample rests, especially in the beginning days of your yoga practice. Take the rest to let the arms refresh themselves, to let your breath come back to its nice, easy rhythm. And then here we go for round 3. Come back onto all fours for our setup. Your shoulders are going to be right over your wrists. Your knees a few inches behind your hips. Your toes curled under, and you lift. You lift up off the floor.
Broaden your back, straighten your elbows, move the imaginary block back away from your hands. Keep the length of your waist as you make both legs straight. Easier said than done. You might have a little tension in the backs of your legs, so keep breathing. Keep breathing. Eventually it's going to dissolve. It wants to dissolve. And one other little trick that helps with the backs of the legs, if you lift your heels a few inches up off the ground and lift your kneecaps up so as to straighten your legs. Keep the height of the hips you've created while you stretch your heels toward the floor. And that will give you a more thorough stretch. Probably an easier stretch on the backs of your legs. Do it one more time. Lift your heels up off the floor a few inches. Lift your kneecaps up the legs. Keeping the legs straight, slowly start to release your heels down. And bend your knees to the ground. What a wonderful pose. The old downward dog. It feels like it never gets old no matter how many times you practice it. Notice in your child's pose the warmth of your arms, the length of your back, the rhythm of your breath. Again, downward facing dog pose. When you come to all fours, spread your fingers. Make sure your shoulders are over your wrists and your knees a few inches behind your hips. Sometimes, and we should even mention this too, sometimes we forget that even the forearms are receiving a little toning as well. And if you're a keyboard user, a lot of times you'll have imbalanced muscle tone in your forearms. So you might be feeling some work happening there as well. Curl your toes under. Lift your knees off the floor. Remember where the block was in Hero's Pose. Push the block back, the imaginary block back to lengthen your back. Revisit your arms. Try spreading your upper back wide while you fully extend through your inner elbows. Keep moving the imaginary block back to lengthen your back. And now fully straighten your legs. Remember our other little trick? You lift the heels up off the floor a couple inches. You lift the kneecaps up, and keeping your legs straight, cascade your heels down. One more thing to notice is that probably your lower back is starting to round. And I'm demonstrating that right now. If you are watching, you can take a look. Sometimes the lower back gets sort of flattened or rounded, and then it's come out of its natural curve. So if you remember your sitting bones, your buttock bones on the block, try lifting them back up to the sky. You lift them up to the sky so your pelvis is neutral, your spine is long, and again, you're going to enthusiastically strengthen your arms. Strengthen the muscles around your knees and fully extend all four limbs while you breathe. Two more times. And child's pose, come down for a rest. Knees a little wider than hips width. Point your toes. Let your trunk settle down between your thighs. Stay as long as you need to in child's pose. Because, again, it's a wonderful resting position. But one thing you notice, too, is that not only did the downward dogs invigorate your arms and legs, but just by virtue of your head being lower than your heart, it tends to calm the brain.
So you might notice in your child's pose that there's a calmness, a curious calmness to the brain, but still a residual strength and wakefulness to your limbs. And that, in our opinion, is part of the amazing balance, the balanced quality of a yoga practice. Thanks very much for practicing with us. See you next time.